Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the General Manager of Defense Security Solutions at Microsoft, Vishal Amin.
Good morning. Let me start by saying I am actually mistakenly here. In 1998, and let me explain. In 1998, I walked down to a recruiting office in San Diego, California, thinking to take my name off of a calling list because I thought I was going to be a lawyer or a doctor, which my grades did not reflect by any means. And at 17, I walked home with an agreement to join and enlist in the United States Marine Corps. I came home, and my mother cried, and I said, you know, it's okay. I'm 17, I need your consent. And as a first-generation American, my father, born in Uganda, exiled family, and eventually migrated here to the United States, said, in this family, when you make a commitment to something, you do it. He walked me down to the office the next morning, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps regretfully, and I had no clue what I was doing. Years later, I had served with our reconnaissance teams. I went to university. I flew in the fighter community and got to do what every individual would want to do. I was a fighter pilot. I met the woman of my dreams and had our first 2 children while I was deployed, went back into the special operations community, got to be part of some amazing opportunities and operations to go really defend democracy around the world. It wasn't until March 21st of 2015 that I realized what identity really meant to me. It was that day where I was here within the confines of the United States, where we all live freely and we all live with the privileges that many of us take for granted, that I turned on Fox News and CNN and I saw my picture, my name, my address on the Islamic State's top 100 people to be killed list. I was escorted home that day by the Joint Terrorism Task Force. My home was cleared like a narcotics lab. The newborn son we had was laying there, and my wife said, our life is over, and by the way, what were you doing over there? At 19 years, financially, because our home now was targeted by ISIS, we're publicly outed, we couldn't sell our home, we couldn't live the same way we did. We had terrorist intercepts to our home here in the United States. That I left the Marine Corps and I dedicated my life's work to protecting the identity and understanding why data transcends borders, no matter where you are. We're here talking about freedom and liberty and democracy. And in a world where we have so many conflicts, yet so much love, data can transcend all of that and put our lives at risk. I woke up every morning turning on my car a mile down the road before I put my kids in it. I wasn't used to having protection following me to and from my kids' school. This changed the way I lived my life, and it's why I put so much time and effort into helping all of us understand the importance of data. As I wrap my story, I'd like to share that some of the work that I'm able to do, powered by the Bush Institute, is take signals that we have at companies like Microsoft and many others, and give that data to organizations that are making an impact in the world, that are protecting against religious prosecution. Whether they're our customers, whether they're anyone else's customers, because data can really save a human life. It can really change the way we look at democracy and the way we land it. So my call to you and my call to action to everyone here today is like Ken said earlier, if not us, then who? If we don't act and we don't do something different, then no one else will. When you are in a position to make a decision and invest in anything, invest in something different. When you are in a position to make a decision on what the best choice to make is, just do the next right thing. And empower those that traditionally may have not had that opportunity. I'm just a washed up Marine in tech. But I'll challenge all of you, be bold and be different. I'd like to introduce the next panel. Chris Walsh will be moderating, and they'll be speaking about religious freedoms. And Chris, I'd like to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Really well done.
Thank you.
Good morning again. It's been a great day already. It's always difficult to be the panel before lunch. It's a great challenge, but the solution to that is to have a dynamic topic. We're going to talk about the things of ultimate concern, about purpose, about meaning, about living the good life. And it doesn't hurt to have a grand slam panelist. That's a good thing. So it's my honor to introduce first to my left, Rushan Abbas, who is the founder and executive director of the Campaign for Uyghurs, David French, the opinion columnist for the New York Times, and Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO and national director for the ADL. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. Let's start off with, I think in our minds, religious freedom is something that feels instinctively right and good. But in practice, it's something that's hard, it's complex. So let's set a baseline for our audience and for all of us as we have this discussion. I pose this question to all of you in just a couple sentences, if that's possible. I'll start with you, Rushan. What is religious freedom, and why does it matter?
To me, it is practicing what you believe, what's dear to your heart, without repression and retaliation from the government, as well as being able to live and manifest what's in your heart with your conscience without any kind of interference from the government. The individual freedom to choose for what we believe, how we believe, and why we believe. And for the Uyghur people, that's taken away. The religion, to me, is what makes a human being.
Thank you, Sean. David, please.
I've defined religious liberty over the years as the ability to think, to speak, and very critically, to act in accordance with your deepest beliefs, so long as those actions do not interfere with the rights of others. And that by doing that, you preserve a pluralistic society and you preserve the rights of human conscience.
Thank you, David. And Jonathan, please.
I think religious freedom is the right to believe what you want, to pray how you want, and to do it where you want. And I think the flip side of religious freedom is the government not imparting upon us, some rigidity or some official religion of the things that we see in so many countries around the world.
Thank you. And I think this is a topic in particular. We say here at the Bush Center and the Bush Institute, what happens abroad affects us here at home. And perhaps nothing more than religious freedom is a thing that we feel more than other things when it comes to what happens around the world affecting us here at home. So let's start with a few ideas, maybe look at the American experience a little bit, and then we'll look at the international experience. So David, let me ask you this. You did mention pluralism. A few years ago, you were actually interviewing with the Bush Institute. You were talking about a blog that you had read, and you paraphrased it. You said, classical liberalism and pluralism are the greatest civil war avoidance mechanisms ever created by the mind of man. Thinking about this in the context of something as complex, as contradictory, as conflicting as religion, is this still true? And if so, why? How?
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely true. Let me be as blunt as possible. It's pluralism or war when it comes to religious differences. The history has taught us this over millennia, that when you're dealing with a conflict between peoples who have very deep, profound beliefs with eternal implications, that any attempt to dominate of one religious people group to dominate and suppress another religious people group leads to war. It leads to some of the most vicious conflicts we've seen in world history. And so I often, when I'm talking to audiences who are increasingly skeptical of pluralism now, who often want to dominate their opponents, I say, guys, even putting aside the violation of the golden rule there, that I believe in fighting for the rights of others that I would like to exercise myself as a matter of moral principle. But even putting aside the moral principle, if you think in a continent-sized, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy that you can fight and win and impose your religious moral view on the rest of this country, that is fantasy thinking. It has been tried. Here is what works. What works is actually the religious pluralism that you take for granted. And I'll often speak about, I live outside of Nashville, the miracle of Franklin Road. That's a north-south road in Franklin, north of Franklin, Tennessee. And I heard a murmur of appreciation. Some people have been on that road. And you remember it. It is megachurch after megachurch after megachurch. And there's not far from it a synagogue, not far from it a mosque. And I drive on that, and I think that's a miracle. Just a few hundred years ago, you would have those same churches, and the church bulletin would be very different. It would say, prayer meeting at 10, worship service at 11, casseroles at 12, Catholic burning at 1. And now the main conflict is over, position in the buffet line after church. And this is a miracle. And we did it without asking Catholics not to be Catholic, without asking Baptists not to be Baptist, without asking our Jewish and Muslim friends and neighbors not to be Jewish or Muslim. We said, be people of deep conviction, and also allow other people to be people of deep conviction. I love the formulation of pluralism that from President of Biola College in Los Angeles. He talks about pluralism as requiring a firm center, that's your deep conviction, and a soft edge, which is how you interact with your fellow citizens. And I love that picture of pluralism.
Me too. Jonathan, let me turn to you. Thinking back to the founding of the United States, thinking back to our founding president, George Washington, I love the idea of him writing to different faith congregations, expressing that religious liberty is not just a right, but a duty of good citizenship. And I contrast that with today, where at least it feels that there's a brazenness on campuses, in politics, expressed by leaders, about expressing hatred or bigotry or even committing acts of violence against people of different faiths, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. Even Christians feel that the secular world is attacking their beliefs. So I'm wondering, how real do you think this perception is, especially compared to recent history?
First of all, I just have to say how much I appreciated David's response to the prior question. I think we take for granted just how special, just how powerful the American ideal is that allows for this. It's unique in human history, and it's deeply, deeply impressive. So I'm glad you kind of raised it. And you go back to this American ideal, as you're sort of alluding to. This country was founded by religious dissidents, people who were fleeing persecution. And it's not lost on me as an American Jew that President Washington wrote that letter to the synagogue in Rhode Island, which in many ways was presaged this American commitment to pluralism. That has been such a powerful thread throughout almost 250, 70, whatever the number is, years of American history. So flash forward to today. I think, the new religion in some ways, oftentimes on campuses, seems to be not liberalism, but illiberalism. And it seems to me like we are in a certain sort of configuration that's the opposite of what the president of Biola described. Instead of the deep center with soft edges, like a shallow center with hard edges, where people seem to revel in not, contrasting or, constructively disagreeing with people, but tearing them apart. You see it on college campuses, where there is this, again, this sort of orthodoxy, that claims to be, it claims to be open-minded, but it's most noteworthy for its closed-mindedness. And not for its, we're here in the Bush Center, not for its compassion, but for its lack of compassion. Jewish kids see it, and many of you probably watched the hearing yesterday where the Columbia president was testifying about anti-Semitism. She had the benefit of being the second hearing after her one-time colleagues who now have their resumes out from Harvard and Penn, let alone MIT, testified. And I've heard these stories. I spent last Thursday at Harvard Law School. Are you a Harvard Law School?
Yes.
At Harvard Law School, the stories that I heard were just mind-bending about Jewish kids being isolated and marginalized and ridiculed because they're Jews. Not because of their views on Bibi Netanyahu, not because of their views on a two-state solution, because they're Jews. So I think we're in a particularly tricky moment, and earlier this week, ADL released our annual report of anti-Semitic incidents in the United States. 2023 was, after reaching record highs in 3 of the prior 4 years, we blew it away last year. 140% increase over the prior year. Thousands of acts of vandalism, thousands and thousands of acts of harassment, nearly 9,000 incidents. Again, almost 150% greater than the prior year, the previous record. So something's definitely going on, and I think all of us, and I'll make one last point. Anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. Of course it is. Hating people because they're Jewish, hating someone because they're Zionist, hating someone because of how they pray, of course that affects the victim. But anti-Semitism is symptomatic of a kind of illiberalism, of a sickness in a society. And so what I worry about, and I think all Americans need to worry about, is a society that accepts anti-Semitism and the scapegoating and the slander that goes with it. It's a sign of an unraveling.
And it's amazing to think about that these are challenges in a free and democratic society. It goes back to what I was saying before, that this idea of religious freedom in practice is hard. So if I may, Rushan, I'm going to turn to you, and I want to try and bridge this American experience with the global experience of freedom. Let's talk a little bit about a country where there is no commitment, like there is in the United States, to the idea of religious freedom, to the idea of religious pluralism. Notably, the Chinese government has persecuted Muslim Uyghurs, which I know you know very well, Tibetan Buddhists, Christians, and a host of others. Could you explain why does the Chinese Communist Party feel threatened by these religious groups? What is driving it?
Thank you for that. And let me take a couple minutes of time to give a little bit of background and to speak about my personal experience. I came to the United States when I was 21 years old, graduated university, without speaking English, without anybody, young girl, just left my parents, my family, siblings, my friends, my home, my country. I came here because something that we did not have back home, the freedom and the democracy. And ever since I came here, I tried to advocate for Uyghur people, and fast forward to last 7-8 years. After everything the Chinese government did to oppress and label Uyghurs in every few years and persecute them, but today there's a full-fledged active genocide is happening because of my ethnicity, because of the people believe the religion that they choose to believe, and because of our homeland, which is beautiful, filled with high mountains and the large desert and the high mountains and desert. We all know what's under desert. Natural resources, oil, petroleum. Starting from 2017, over 1 million people disappeared to detention centers. My husband's entire family went missing, 24 people. He's here with me. My parents-in-laws, 3 of my sister-in-laws, their husbands, brother-in-law and his wife, 14 of their nieces. Millions of women are facing forced sterilization, forced abortions. 85% of the Uyghur women on childbearing age, all forced sterilized. Uyghur population, Uyghur birth rate dropped down to 0% in the last several years. Almost 1 million Uyghur children are taken from their families, sent to state-run orphanages. State media reported that 1.1 million Han Chinese cadres moved into Uyghur homes, live inside of their homes, monitor and supervise people's daily lives, make them slaves inside of their own home. And I spoke about this atrocity on September 2018 at Hudson Institute, exercising my First Amendment right, my freedom of speech in the United States as an American citizen, talking about the genocidal policies. 6 days after that, they took my own sister as a hostage. So basically, my freedom of speech cost her freedom. She's in jail right now. She's a retired medical doctor. 5 years, 7 months, and 8 days that she is in prison. So today, I am here talking to you at the cost of my sister's freedom. Why it's so important for me to continue this fight? At the cost of her life, maybe, I don't know, if she's still alive, if I will ever see her again. Because that freedom and the democracy I once left my home is at stake here in this country. Yes, we have freedom to criticize our government, as the previous panel, Nicole mentioned. You can call United States government and they calling this country is committing crimes here and the crimes there. That is the beauty of the democracy, that you can speak without retaliation, without facing persecution. But when you look at all these major CEOs from the major companies who are profiting from this genocide, using Uyghur slaves for forced labor, all these woke companies, all these people from Hollywood celebrities, NBA superstars, famous talk show hosts, everyone is so vocal against any kind of social injustice anywhere. Rightfully, they should, right? Where are they when 13 tons of human hair, feel it, 13 tons of human hair, how many lives does that represent? Made it over to United States Customs and Border Patrol. And nobody reported that. Nobody talks about that. If you don't talk about an atrocity like what's happening to Uyghurs today, you lose privilege of speaking for anything else in this country. But what fears me is the future of this country, the future of freedom and democracy is at stake. That's being threatened. So that's why we have to fight. We have to fight because we have to fight for humanity and the freedom and democracy. We have to fight to live a better world for our children and our grandchildren.
Here, here.
Thank you for sharing what you've struggled through, Rushan. I want to turn to David for a moment. Obviously, what Beijing has done in the case of the Uyghurs and others is terrible, but they don't have a monopoly on religious persecution or manipulating religion. I think of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. I think of Vladimir Putin co-opting Christian Orthodoxy for his own purposes in this war. I'd like to talk a little bit about that, and if you could, what is the danger of weaponizing religion in this way?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say, I mean, how much of a privilege has it been to hear from folks who have demonstrated such enormous courage? It's been convicting to me. I grew up a Southern evangelical. I had it pretty good. you know, growing up in Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, you take a lot of things for granted. And today has been a real moment to remind us we can take nothing for granted. So on to Putin. Let's just be blunt. Vladimir Putin is what Christian nationalism looks like. Okay, so essentially what you have is, it is a mistake to say that Putin wants to recreate the USSR. That was an atheistic communist empire. It is more accurate to say he wants to recreate the Russian Empire. The Russian Empire, which was deeply steeped in orthodoxy, deeply steeped, and was a united, if you looked at the map of the USSR, you had the map divisions of Ukraine and all of the other Soviet socialist republics. You look at the old maps of the Russian Empire, it's one big mass. And what do you not see on those maps? You don't see the country of Ukraine. You don't see the country of Poland. You don't see the countries of Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. This is an all-encompassing and, very important to note, religiously motivated worldview. Now, Putin may be using religion cynically, he may be, but guess what? That's what Christian nationalism has been for its whole existence, is a wide-scale use of Christianity for through cynical means. And I think Americans are not getting the religious dimensions of this conflict enough. This is something about a deep conflict within orthodoxy. It's a conflict for religious supremacy in many ways of the Russian Orthodox Church. The Russian Orthodox Church even has a parish in the FSB building. This is a religiously, the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church has blessed this war and blessed the military effort. And the way I put it, I have this delightful class that I teach of lifelong learners in Nashville. And these are just some of the most delightful people. And they were asking me, why is it that Christian nationalism always gets violent? And I said, well, when you talk about Christian nationalism, what you're talking about is the recreation of older forms of religious authority in the state, where traditionally in Western civilization, before the wars of religion and the Enlightenment, you combine warrior, priest, and king and as the head of the state. And I said, the way that always works is, hey, if you don't like the king part of this guy, you're going to get the warrior. If you don't like the religion part of this guy, you're going to get the warrior. But the warrior is the dominant motif. And that is the case with Vladimir Putin. And I see a disturbing number, sometimes the problem is exaggerated, but I see a disturbing number of American Christians who are flirting with this idea of domination. There's even a concept in Pentecostal circles of something called seven mountain dominionism. And what it means is that Christians should rule all seven key areas of culture: entertainment, media, education, commerce, etc. It's a form of Christian identity politics that says Christians should rule. And that is horrible for our constitutional order, and it's also horrible for Christianity. Because the fruit of the Spirit, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, does not abound when Christianity bears the sword. And that is a danger that we face, and there is an allure as America becomes more fractured and divided and divisive. A lot of Christians are reaching now for the sword, either literally sometimes, as we saw on January 6th, or figuratively in the rhetoric that they deploy against their opponents. And in this divisive time, when I believe in a religion that says, love your enemies and bless those who persecute you, Christian participation in politics should be blazing forth in a countercultural unifying vision, loving vision. Unfortunately, too much it's the opposite. And so we need to look at what's happened in Russia and say that is the end of the road. That is where Christian nationalism leads, to blood and war. You're seeing a similar theme, very uplifting from my previous remarks about pluralism or war. That is literally the choice.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Jonathan, if we didn't recognize it previously, I think the recent conflict in the Middle East has made us feel how these international religious divides affect us. And I'm curious, as we see nations and their populations polarized about these issues, is there any common ground that either the nations themselves or their populations internally can find? And I wonder if religious liberty offers one such pathway.
Well, I guess I have two thoughts. So David was talking about the cynicism of Vladimir Putin and how he uses the Orthodox Church to kind of legitimize his autocracy. I don't know if there's a more cynical use of religion than what we see coming out of Tehran. It is remarkable to think that the Islamic Republic of Iran is building and investing and lifting up their alliance with Communist China, even as it enslaves and commits a kind of cultural and human genocide against the Uyghur people. And yet, from Tehran, silence. You know, 500,000 people were killed in Syria in the Syrian civil war, a war which Iran prosecuted and murdered their co-religionists with impunity. It's the Sudan, which is now, you know, on the verge of a total famine that will affect millions and millions of people, not a word. The only country they have a problem with, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is Israel. You know, Iran has its sort of military proxies in the region, which are often talked about, but they also have, I would say, they're somewhat like political proxies here in the US who tell us we have to accept this, which we shouldn't. We shouldn't at all. They have the blood on their hands of Americans. They have the blood on their hands of Israelis. They have the blood on their hands of, I would say, Uyghurs. But there are signs of hope. Go to Jerusalem. Go to East Jerusalem. You can visit the Kotel, you know, the western wall of the ancient temple. You can walk around the corner and go visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You can go up and then visit the Haram al-Sharif, the holy place. It's right there. Or you can go up to Haifa and you can go visit the Baha'i Temple. And you can see religious sites that Muslims and Christians and Jews and Baha'i and all other people are able to visit freely. Like, I agree with the formulation that David put out. It is pluralism or war, and pluralism is a much richer, more rewarding, and I think more uplifting path for all of us to walk.
And I appreciate you steering us away from the gloom and doom. There's a lot of gloom and doom.
Yeah. Look, there's, and I didn't mention it, but I will find a way to mention this and remind all of us that, like, the situation in the Middle East right now in Gaza is a tragedy. You know, every innocent life lost is a world lost. We should mourn the death of civilians. And the tragedy will end when Hamas frees the 130 hostages still held in tunnels, in cages under Gaza. They need to bring.
In the few minutes we have left, I do want to dig a little more into solutions, optimism, hope. Rushan, let me turn to you. When you think about the plight of the Uyghur people, other religious minorities, other religious groups that are being persecuted, what can governments, what can civil society, what can individuals like us do to support these groups, to support religious freedom, to make the world better?
Every country out there, I shouldn't say every, but majority of the countries, governments and officials and the companies are acting like they depend on the forced labor or China's money to survive. That needs to end. They need to act to hold the Chinese government accountable. Just adding to what Johnson said about the Jewish people and Israel and the Holocaust. Back in the 40s, there's so many countries continued to do business with Nazi Germany in the name of economic advancement. Also, they know what was happening, but later they claimed that the ignorance by saying, oh, we didn't know what was happening. Well, nobody can claim the ignorance today because this is information era. Everybody knows what's happening. There's a vow, never again, and we need to uphold that. So the individuals, you don't need to be Uyghur or activist or politician or leader. You just need to be human to do something. First of all, the Uyghur organizations and the organizations and like endowment, the National Endowment for Democracy, who's supporting the Uyghur organizations and activists, needs to gain access to financial aids and support instead of cutting our budget so we can lay off our people, but we need the financial help. The Chinese government is spreading disinformation and the propaganda by the millions and billions. We need the support. We need the voices to hold the Chinese government accountable. We cannot just look at the short-term economic benefits we are receiving and like CEOs in San Francisco give standing ovation for a dictator, for Xi Jinping. We need to act with conscience. The humanity is being tested. Conscience of the world is being tested. We need to pass that test. If we don't speak out right now, it's not just what's happening. 2 Uyghur people are staying within China's borders with transnational repression. It's coming here. It's going everywhere. So if we speak today, if we act and speak out, then the only voice left to speak will be one of regret.
Thank you. There's never enough time. I wish we, and it's cliche to say, I wish we could stand here for hours. I know that you don't want to do that, but talking about this, I know our audience would love to hear more. But as I promised, a Grand Slam panel, lots of big ideas, lots of challenges, but lots of hope and optimism. Please join me in thanking our great panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and president of Eagle Online Academy, Mozhgan Wafiq Alokozai.
Good morning, everyone. Dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable guests. It's my honor to be here today. I always describe myself as a child of war, because when I was born in 1985, Afghanistan already envisioned by Soviet Union. And by early 90s, we have experienced 3 times displacement, and actually internally displacement because of civil war. By mid-90s, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, again, everything changed. They banned schooling for girls, employment for women, and many other restrictions for both gender, men and women. Eventually, my family has decided to leave the country and become refugee to Pakistan, because my parents did not want to compromise with their daughter's education. As a 10-year-old girl, I always remember how my parents struggled to find a job in Pakistan, to enroll us in a school in Pakistan, because there was very limited options for Afghan children to go to school. And so anyways, we have continued our education, and we have continued our education. And there was no hope. As it is, there was no hope for anyone for our future, and no vision for our future. After 9/11, when the President Bush and their alliance decided to abet tourism in Afghanistan, to save millions of lives globally, it did not only affect or add a positive impact for them, it also positively impacted millions of lives in Afghanistan. In 2001, when the Taliban collapsed, in 2002, we returned back to Afghanistan. And I always remember the feeling of hope and happiness upon my return to Afghanistan. I have continued my education there, and I have dream and vision for my future to be someone. Today, a refugee girl as I stand in front of you is all because of the progress of 2001 to 2021 that happened in my country. And beside myself, there is many changes happened to thousands of girls' lives in Afghanistan during the 20 years of American presence there. So I have some numbers that I would like to share with you. From 0 in 2001, we had 4 million girls enrolled in school. More than 100,000 girls went to university. Women held 10% of high-level positions, including ministers, deputy ministers, ambassadors, and women made up to 27% of parliament members. The country had over 1,300 media and journalists, female employees. After all those commitment, dedication, and progress that happened in Afghanistan, unfortunately, one more time, Taliban seized the control of the country by August 2021. And the last 2.5 years, unfortunately, they have released more than 100 decreases, which 60% targeting women, banned them from the school, employment, and many other social activities. Additionally, the Taliban have taken control of the school curriculum, prioritize Islamic subject over science and other essential disciplines. They have established over 15,000 madrasas across the country. And they are forcing the families to send their children, both male and female, to attend those religious schools. And the main purpose of their madrasas to teach the population with extremist ideology, which can be threatened for Afghanistan for short term, and it can be threatened for the world and long-term security. The Bush Center has been supported and advocate for Afghanistan and its people for a long time. After the collapse of Afghanistan, the Bush Center took the initiative to establish the Afghan Women Education Working Group. The main purpose of the working group to support, explore the opportunities for Afghan women, and also to author a paper and amplify the support for Afghan girls and women. And as a part of the working group, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Natalie and all the team of Bush Institute that has been supporter of Afghanistan and Afghan women and girls all the time. I also want to acknowledge one of the most transformative programs in my life, the Presidential Leadership Scholar. In 2022, I had the privilege to join the initiative as a new immigrant in US since 2015. The program provided me with a deeper understanding of America, from politics to community structure, from education system to history. The program brought 60 leaders from diverse backgrounds under one umbrella, and gave us the opportunity to network, share knowledge, and also eventually we become family. I have received unconditional support from the program, I'm always grateful for that. So beside that, okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, so since you're all here, I'm so sorry for that because I have missed the consequences of when I'm talking. Okay, since everybody is here, I believe to the freedom, women empowerment, and power of education. I have the opportunity to establish Eagle Online Academy in 2019. The Eagle Online Academy is a nonprofit based in Virginia. We are serving women and girls in developing and war-zone countries. And my starting point was Afghanistan. For the first year, we have served more than 218 women in 17 provinces of Afghanistan. By Afghanistan collapse in August 2021, Eagle Online Academy extended their services to Afghan women and girls refugee population globally. And we also, when the Taliban announced during March 2022 that they are not allowing women and girls to attend they are not allowing the girls to attend the school above grade 6. Egan Online Academy launched the program. It calls Educate to Graduate. We serve Afghan girls with the schooling program from grade 7 to 12. And fortunately, we have also extended our services to Ukrainian by July 2022. And today, we have the privilege to serve more than 2,000 women globally from both nations, Afghan and Ukrainian, in the last 5 years. As a leaders today here, I'm sure everybody trusts to freedom, women empowerment, and power of education. I would request everybody, please, we must raise our voices to prevent Afghanistan from becoming a breeding ground for terrorism once again. We must raise our voices to give Afghan women and girls their basic rights. We must stand with Ukrainian women and girls in this crisis time. At the same time, I would request everybody, please support any educational programs that you are familiar with, because I believe nowadays the online education remains the only option for Afghan women and girls to continue their education in the ground, as well for the refugee population that they are based in neighboring countries, with limited access to education or no access to education. And it also saves our environment for our Ukrainian female to continue with their education from safer place or from the corner of their houses. I believe together we can make the world a better place. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mozhgan. And I would say that we're all here at the Bush Center to raise our voices. And now it's time to break for lunch. We have lunch upstairs for all of us, where we will carry on in a very important conversation with CIA Director Bill Burns, and also remarks from President Bush. It's been an absolutely outstanding morning, and thank you all for your attention and your time.